Have recent geopolitical events left you short on nitrogen? Or are you holding back due to high input costs and uncertainty around how much you'll sell the crop for? The good news is that for most of our other nutrients, we can short them for 1 year. And note that's 1 year, as long as we haven't been shorting them for many years. So when you keep up with replacement, you have a buffer in place. Nitrogen is not like this. Applying some upfront is nearly always needed. There's always the option to top up later if conditions improve and the product is available. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. Cereals and oilseeds take up nitrogen faster than you may expect. Now, in the transcript, which you can look at through episode description, it will take you to my website and I'll have everything there. You can see some uptake charts, and I'll have a link to look at all the uptake charts that they have. It's fairly fascinating to see how quickly our crops take up nitrogen. And this is important because by the time you're ready to top up, the crop may have already locked in its yield potential based on what it sensed during its early root exploration. So, this month, I'm going to focus on a practical framework to help you decide when a split nitrogen strategy makes sense. I'll also point you back to a few articles that can help you if you're struggling with what to do about the other nutrients, including the value of biostimulants, humic acids, and other non traditional fertility sources. Now, in case you're new here, let me introduce myself. My name is Scott Gillespie, and I'm an Alberta based author, podcaster, and independent agronomy consultant. I have nearly 2 decades of experience in dryland and irrigated specialty crop systems, working across organic, conventional, and regenerative farms. Through my consulting, my podcast, which you're listening to right now, Plants Dig Soil, and my book, Practical Regeneration Realistic Strategies for Climate Smart Agriculture, the basis of my advice is simple. It's science backed practices that promote environmental stewardship and farm profitability. Now, you can get this as a newsletter. I use MailChimp, so it just comes straight to your regular email address. I use LinkedIn, so it notifies you on LinkedIn and it also sends a message to your email. I post this on YouTube, and then, of course, it goes out on podcast players. I use Spotify to upload it, but then that also puts out the link for every other podcast player to find it. So you should be able to find it just about everywhere. So now to the main article. This is the one that has been recently published. It's called Hedging Your Bets, Making Split Applications Pay. Now, splitting your nitrogen is really about keeping your options open. Instead of applying the full rate upfront, you apply enough for a low to moderate yield potential. Then, depending on how the season develops, whether you get timely rain, how the crop looks, or what the markets are doing, you decide whether or not to top up. So it's a way to hedge against risk, but for it to be useful, it needs structure. First of all, you need a decision date. You need a specific point where you decide whether you go ahead with top dressing or not. And it should be field specific, not just a farm wide call on this. You need a field readiness check. So you need to assess whether the crop warrants more nitrogen and weather conditions will allow you to apply it without compacting or damaging the field. And you need a stop date. You need a point where past a certain growth stage, the crop just won't respond to additional nitrogen. And by then, you're more likely to hurt the crop than to help it because of the wheel tracks. In cereals, most nitrogen uptake happens between tillering and early stem elongation. By the time you can feel the head in the boot, the crop has already taken up 80 to 90% of its nitrogen. In canola, the uptake curve is similar. By 30% bloom, so about the time you're applying fungicide, the crop has already taken up most of its nitrogen. What that means is that your window for in-season nitrogen is short. Once the crop senses a nitrogen shortage, it adjusts yields expectations accordingly. It doesn't just wait to see if you'll add more. Now, the biggest concern for most growers is volatilization. So if urea is left on the surface and not incorporated, it can gas off as ammonia, especially in warm and windy conditions. Urease inhibitors can delay that loss for about a week or two, but they don't stop it indefinitely. Incorporating urea by banding it or through a timely rainfall helps to protect it. So that's why putting out the seeder is generally the most efficient use of nitrogen. When applied to the surface, a half inch to 3/4 inch rain is usually enough to move it into the soil. A downpour can sometimes be too fast, so if the water is running off rather than soaking in, you risk losing nitrogen that way too. Leaching is less common under prairie conditions, especially for dry land. Sandy loam, for example, holds about 1.5 inches of water per foot of depth. Most roots in cereals and canola can go down to about 3 or 4 feet. So even if you get a 3 inch rain, the nitrogen is still within reach. But it is worth asking, how often do you actually get that kind of rain after seeding? Denitrification is the final loss mechanism. This is where saturated soils create anaerobic conditions and microbes convert nitrate to gases that escape into the atmosphere. So here's the important questions. Do you often see meaningful nitrogen losses? Are those losses consistent enough in certain areas, like low spots or poorly drained areas, to justify managing them separately? Can you apply nitrogen before the major uptake window closes? Will there be rain soon after application to incorporate the nitrogen? And will there be more rain afterwards to support that extra growth? If you can't answer yes to most of these, split applications might not be worth the extra work. In most cases, a well-executed all-upfront strategy checks all 4 boxes of 4 Rs: right source, right rate, right time, right place. The timing of seeding aligns closely with crop nitrogen demand, and there are fewer chances for loss if the nitrogen is placed correctly. But if you've got known high-risk zones, then splitting application might give you more control and potentially better efficiency. To read the complete article, please go to the transcript or search out Better Farming Prairies, April 2026, page 44. I know it's late in the game for planning nutrient applications, but if you want to do a quick check on where you stand, here's an article from last fall where I discussed the value of calculating your nutrient imports and exports. If you've been balancing things well, then you can mine the soil a little bit this year when it comes to the non-mobile nutrients, basically everything except for nitrogen. If you've been mining it for a while, the risk of low or zero rates increases. So here's an excerpt from Imports versus Exports, the only soil balancing you need to do. A tool that works very well to get a big picture view of nutrient flows is the Nutrient Budgeting app. And there's a link, again, in the transcript. Or you can just search out that name. While it was originally developed for organic growers, it's useful for those transitioning to organic production or those in conventional production who are curious about nutrient flows. It takes a little while to enter all your imports and exports, but with the scientific literature to back up the values, you can trust that the number you get will be fairly close to your actual flows. If you just need a quick and dirty calculation of how much you're exporting, the Prairie Nutrient Removal Calculator, and you can search that out or look for the link in the transcript, is the way to go. Just select your crop and fill in your yield, and it will tell you what you're taking out. From there, you can compare it to the amount of fertilizer you've been adding to see your net flows. Building or mining the soil is not necessarily good or bad. These calculators only tell you the direction of nutrient flows. You must also know the starting point. For this, you need soil test values. In my last article, Test Smarter to Spend Less, again, there'll be a link for that in the transcript, I went into much more detail on soil tests and what they tell me. In that article, I said that a single test gives a snapshot and multiple years tell a story. The story they tell you is whether you are an importer, exporter, or doing a fairly good job of balancing nutrient flows. So let's take phosphorus, for example. You may not need a lot to get a response when you start with moderate levels in the soil. So say you've been putting down 15 pounds every year for every crop with the seeder. Now, very likely, you'll find that that isn't replacing what has been exported in the grain, and you might see your soil test going down. If you have manure available and you've been adding it regularly for 10 to 20 years, you might find that your building levels, if the soil started low and are now at moderate levels, this is good. However, if they're getting to higher excessive levels, you have a problem developing. So to read the complete article, use the link in the transcript or go to Better Farming Prairies, October 2025, page 48. And finally, here's an article from last fall where I worked through the value of nutrient additives. The bottom line is it is very tough to know where they stand without on farm testing, a luxury that you won't have if you feel forced into using them this year. However, please leave some check strips if you're using them to check to see if they did the job you expected. So here's a few excerpts from this article, Nutrient Additives Sorting the Value from the Hype. So one reason why many biostimulants are on the market in Canada is regulation or lack of it. Fertilizers must prove nutrient guarantees. Pesticides must prove pest control. Biostimulants only need to show that they're safe. That means a product can be sold if it claims to improve plant health, increase stress tolerance, or stimulate roots without proving it actually works. It's a lower bar than fertilizers or pesticides, and it explains why the market is crowded with products making broad promises and offering little independent data. Now, with insects, diseases, and weeds, we have threshold and predictive models. With fertility, we have soil tests and rate trials. With biostimulants, we don't have anything at this level of study. If a product claims to change plant health, you might see differences visually or in satellite imagery. But what really matters is ROI, return on investment. The product either needs to cut costs while maintaining yield or improve yield beyond its cost. Whether it uses nutrients more efficiently, allows better stress tolerance, or wards off pests, it doesn't matter. It just needs to return you more than you put in. So take, for example, the common cost of $20 per acre. If it goes in with an existing pass on the field, the only additional cost is the labor involved. So a big caution, always be sure it's compatible. If there's crop damage, the company selling you the tank mix partners will not support you because you're adding something they have not tested. Now back to ROI, you really should see a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 return. So if you cut other costs by $40 to $60 per acre and maintain yield, it's a win. If you increase yield by $40 to $60 per acre without cutting any other costs, it's a win. So to read the complete article, use the link in the transcript or look for Rural Living in Lethbridge County, Fall 2025, page 22. So thanks for your attention. If something resonated, please let me know. I love to hear from people. Also, sharing this edition in your social networks, whether a post or to small group of friends, colleagues, clients, very much appreciated. You can also support me by picking up my book, Practical Regeneration, or reaching out for agronomy support. And all the information is found on my website, www.plantsdigsoil.com. So here's to growing more, believing less, and always digging a little deeper.